and it actually serves up the runtime apps that you publish. When you publish applications, they're going to be served up by the same VM, right? And so we use, so you come in, and it says, so let's say I've deployed an application, it comes in, and I try to access that application, it comes in and it says, you go to the browser, you go to the URL of the application, right? And it goes, okay, let me go try and hit my OIC VM, and it gets intercepted by IDCS, Identity Cloud Service, which is the identity provider for PaaS, right? And that IDCS may be federated to your Fusion applications identity provider, right? So we all know Fusion applications have a different identity provider than PaaS, right? So you have to federate these two to achieve single sign-on. Right, so I'll try and get this URL, I'll get booted to IDCS. IDCS will optionally boot me over to Fusion. I'll log in, I'll come back, now I've got a token that says this is who I am, right? And I can use that token to retrieve info about all the groups that I'm in and all the permissions I have. Great. Now, VBCS serves up the static assets, serves up my HTML, my CSS, and my JavaScript. Those get loaded in the browser. It goes through and it hits some JavaScript that says, hey, go call a REST API, okay? Go call some service connections. So your REST is either coming from business objects, and those REST endpoints live here on the OIC VM, right? So it'll call that REST, and that REST will go to the database, right? Now, let's have a quick word about our database, right? Today, our database is an internal database. It's not like a VBCS, it's our internal database. You don't have, that database has some limitations. It's got a 5 gigabyte size limit on it, and you don't have direct SQL access to it. So the only way you can access the data that's in that database is through our REST APIs. Now, coming in August, we're in August, we're almost done with August, so where is it? Okay, coming soon. It's been in August for so long. But very soon, I saw actually emails today that we're going through the final rounds of testing, then we're going to push this version. You will be able to bring your own database, right? So when you go and create a project and you say, I want business objects, it'll say, do you want to use our internal database or do you want to bring your own database? And you'll be able to bring an ATP or a VBCS database, right? And then you won't have any size limits, you'll have full SQL access to your data, and life will be fantastic. Okay, so business objects, REST endpoints are here. These REST endpoints it's the same ADF business component, VC REST, that you use on Fusion applications. So if you're used to extending Fusion applications, you're used to dealing with Fusion applications REST endpoints, the structure of the payloads, the query parameters, the way you do custom server-side triggers and so forth, all of that is exactly the same in our business objects, okay? So, right, those REST endpoints end here, they pull data from the database, they return, okay. Then, let's say you're calling some other REST, right? Like I'm calling Fusion apps, right? So, you can so if you are using OAuth, right? If you're using OAuth, and if the services support cours, right? Do you guys know what cours is? Cross-origin resource sharing, right? This is the thing, those of you who don't know, it's this setting where generally, if you try to call a REST endpoint from server john.com from a resource that was not served up from john.com, in a lot of cases that'll fail. It's a security mechanism that it'll fail, unless that service has configured this cross-origin resource sharing to say, yes, I will allow anybody, or I will allow these specific hosts to call me from their assets. So, strangely, a lot of REST APIs don't have cours. A lot of very popular REST APIs don't have cours enabled. Twitter, for example, does not have cours, does not allow cours, right? You gotta call just from another server, right? If my REST APIs support OAuth and support cours, then I can call those REST APIs directly from the client. So I load up some HTML, some JavaScript here. That JavaScript says, hey, go call the Fusion Applications Opportunities service and get the list of opportunities, right? It can execute that call straight from the client to Fusion Apps without ever hitting our middle tier, right? If on the other hand I want to use something like App ID, right? I want to use basic auth, right, or something like that. There's no way to securely store basic auth credentials in the client, right? So that I can call that from the client over there. So instead, in those cases, what we do is we have a proxy on our backend, and so your REST calls go through our proxy to the service provider and then back, right? Back over. I just had a coffee this morning, so I'm speaking really fast. Feel free to slow me down if there's any questions, right, or so forth. But that's about it, right? So what's cool here is, if I have an application, right, so people often ask, well, you know, okay, so if I've got two VMs, how many people can I serve up? How much capacity can that serve up, right? I've got an app that needs to serve 2,000 simultaneous users, you know, at a time. How many VMs do I need to provision in order to do that? And the answer is, well, it depends, right? Because if I'm not using these business objects, right, and all my app is doing is calling a bunch of external REST, and I'm doing that with OAuth and cours, right, then what's this VM doing? Nothing. That's right. All this VM is doing is serving me up HTML, CSS, JavaScript. You know, you can easily handle thousands of concurrent users off of just those two VMs, right, if that's what your app is doing. If, on the other hand, my app, all of my business logic is in business objects, right, and I've got like a lot of server-side computation over here. I've got like every time I submit an invoice, I need to go call 4 different REST APIs, compile like, you know, a bunch of stuff on the server side, and then check that, you know, this invoice actually matches this thing and so forth, and then I will return. Well, then, you know, your load's going to be pretty heavy, right, on that, right? So it kind of depends, right? The basic general guidance we have is, if you're using business objects and so forth, 400 concurrent users per VM is our basic guidance right now. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is that valid also for action changes? If you have
on client side. So it's not gonna really, you can have like really big gnarly action chains, and that'll all be on the client. It might mean your app will run slowly because, you know, you're executing a ton of actions client side. But you know, especially if you have to call like 5 different REST APIs, which frankly sometimes you do, right?
Yeah.
I was doing this thing where I was trying to do this thing with content where you load up an image and then you publish it as an asset, and then you get back the URL for the asset and so forth. And there were like 5 REST API calls I had to do in order to get that all to happen. And so the client's like waiting, you know, like waiting for one call to respond, and then calls off another, and then calls off another. So yeah, you sometimes can get some action chains that take a long time to execute. Okay. All right, I promise I'm going to stop talking soon and get you guys digging into some code. Let me come on now. There you go. All right. So yesterday, let's see, let's pick an app. And what app am I going to pick?